Greetings and welcome to Hexed Encountered. My name is Joe. Today I'm going to be doing a first look at the game Aces of Valor, a solitaire game of World War I aerial combat designed by Erik von Rossing and published by Legion Wargames. Now this game is actually a professionally printed version of it's been redone a little bit as well, but it is basically an updated version of a print and play game. Erik von Rossing has a whole line of basically solitaire print and play games on his own website that it covers a wide variety of various topics and so on and so forth. It's Berserker games, and one of those games actually was printed and will be reprinted by Lock and Load Publishing. That's called A Wing and a Prayer, which is a game about bombing the Third Reich, bombing Germany during World War II. So that game actually is going to be reprinted, I believe, if you believe what's on the Lock and Load Publishing website at least. And so yeah, it's good because I'm a big fan of his games. I have, I think, about 6 or 7 of them from the print and play, and they're all really well designed and they're good if you're a crafter type and like to do your own print and play games. They're probably something you should check out. So again, that's Berserker Games is the website for that. So talking about this game, now as you can probably gather, this, as it says, is a solitaire game of World War I aerial combat. So that means, basically your old school biplanes, Red Baron, all that stuff, fighting over the trenches of the Western Front, and et cetera, et cetera. So let's take a look and see what you get when you pick this game up. And we get an upside down box. Let me turn this around. Okay, so of course, what game does not come with rules, right? So we get our rules book here. And on the back, you can see top aces from the major Western Front combatants: Germany, Manfred von Richthofen, that's the Red Baron for you right there. U.S., Eddie Rickenbacker. Britain, William Bishop. And France, René Fonck. And you can see these three, obviously, with the entire war to go through. They racked up quite the tally there. 26 kills for Rickenbacker in like a year is pretty impressive as well. The Red Baron was the only one who was actually killed, although the casualty rate for pilots was pretty high in World War I. These aircraft were not particularly robust in terms of the airframe, and they, when you shoot it up with a machine gun, they didn't actually tend to survive very long. But you do have, your rules here. And I'm somewhat familiar with these because, as I said, I do have the print and play version of this game. So nothing, some things have been reworked a little bit. The rules have been cleaned up, given a polishing, essentially. But, it's basically 15 pages of rules, which includes optional rules. And then, examples of play, how everything works. There are a lot of components to this game. There's a lot to it. And, you have the ability to basically play as a German pilot, as a British pilot, a French pilot, or an American pilot. You can do any of the 4 countries shown here on the back. You can run a full campaign with those that could cover years in some cases, or just simply months. So there's a lot of flexibility. We get some bags, so you will have something in which to store your counters and components. 4 dice, yellow. That's an interesting color choice, but I have nothing against yellow, but it's just, I'm used to the black and white, red, blue, the more common colors. Here we have a deck of 54 cards, including some optional rules and, the mission cards, etc., etc. So that's kind of nice. Then we have counter sheets. Here's a half sheet. The counter artwork here is really nice. The counter art is done by Mark Mahaffey, and I think he did a fantastic job, as he usually does. But this looks, to me, these are really nice. And one of the things that people have commented on with the print and play stuff, and let me spin this back around, is they don't like the artwork so much. But as a one-man crew, I think Erik has done a good job with his print and play stuff. But obviously having, the team at Legion to work on this and kind of like, as I said, polish it up and make it better is obvious. The benefits of that are obvious as soon as you open the box, if you are familiar with the print and play version. And so here you have, obviously, the aircraft. And you'll see they have names on them. And these are actual World War I pilots. They don't give the last name, just the first name. So, these are British pilots. You have Billy, William, James, Tom. These are actual pilots. And if you're familiar with the history of the various countries and their aces from the First World War, you'll be able to figure out who these guys are. So you do have all of the, one full sheet here. We have another full sheet here. Here are some Germans. So here's Manfred. That would be the Red Baron. And here's his, there's the famous red plane. So you have various versions. The D3, the DR1, etc., D7. And the one thing about, I'm an aviation buff. I was in the Air Force. Obviously, these are really old aircraft. But the colors that they employed, particularly the Germans, they had such a wide variety of aircraft colors that it's interesting because, you look at the Second World War when they started to actually try to camouflage the planes with their paint schemes. You look at the Spitfire as compared to what the Red Baron was flying, and you can see that there's a vast difference there in terms of what the thinking was with the colors. So here's the map, and now the map is interesting, and let me open it up. What's interesting about the map is that it's not what you would consider in many cases to be like a map. It's somewhat abstract, and I'm not going to open the whole thing because it's very large, but you have a chart here that you use to basically track initiative, essentially, for the different aircraft. You have your sequence of play up here, your campaign costs, your combat sequence, right? So you roll initiative for all aircraft, you perform actions in initiative order, etc., etc. The game is not overly complex. The rules are, as I mentioned, 15 pages long, so it's not like it's a really simple game, but this is a game you can, pick up, read through the rules, and start playing fairly quickly. You have your mission deck here with your current mission. You roll for weather. There are AA areas, and I'm going to show you here in a second, the map and the flight event check. So you do have events that you have to deal with. This is, very much in the vein of what you would expect from a solitaire aerial game, where you have events and you roll for things that happen as you progress across the mission map, so to speak. And here is the map. So if you look at this, it's very, I guess, generic in terms of, well, there are cities on here, right? You have Lille and St. Paul, Arras, etc., right? So you do have cities on here, Cambrai, San Quentin, but as far as the layout, this is the front line, so this is no man's land, and you have your trenches, etc. But these guns indicate areas that have anti-aircraft. You have observation balloons, and then you have various targets: rail yards, airfields, depots, etc. So you get the idea. Headquarters. These are all things that you'll have. But like I said, the map is somewhat generic. There are cities on it, and the cities are, potential targets as well. But you also have, depots and kind of your traditional military targets like rail yards and headquarters and the opposing airfields and all this stuff that you can, that are part of the game and as you would expect. So the map, as I mentioned, is very large. You have tracks at the top, your mission turn track. Obviously, I didn't unfold it completely only because of the size. You have your victory point and mission point track, and so on and so forth. So that's the, whoops, that is the map, and you get a lot of player aids as well. So let me bring the box back in here. So talking about player aids, so you have this one here, which is your campaign setup. Then let me zoom in a little bit. All right, campaign setup, your squadron aircraft type, you roll for your airfield, which is basically going to essentially determine where you start on the map, more than anything else. Campaign for as far as results. So you have short, medium, and long campaigns with 8, 12, and 16 missions, respectively. And then depending on your victory points, you can have everything from a strategic victory all the way down to a strategic defeat, as you might expect. Here's the aircraft key, which is nice because this will show you kind of what the aircraft are, right? You have different aircraft types. There are fighters, two-seaters, which basically means you have a rear gun, bombers, and heavy bombers. So you get your gun rating, forward gun, where it's pointing, essentially the pilot, the pilot and crew skills for air and ground. The ground crew does play a part in this as well. Then you have a damaged on the rear, the back. You flip it when it gets damaged, which gives you a reduced gun and performance ratings. And then you have the same kind of thing with two-seaters, where you have a forward gun and a defensive gun. Bombers also have defensive guns. Heavy bombers have 2 defensive guns. So these guys, if you encounter them in a mission, are actually pretty tough to deal with. Then we have our ground targets, which is the first sheet I showed you when I was talking about the counter art that Mark Mahaffey did. This entrenched infantry, how many points you get, their destruction rating, how tough they are basically, initiative rating, and their anti-aircraft defense, backside damage, same kind of thing. And then you have your map key, which just explains what all those symbols mean on the map. Nothing on the back on that one. Then we have this guy here, which is kind of steps you through the mission from your pre-mission phase. You do all this stuff in order. Then you have your weather roll, your ordnance. So unlike World War II, where they hung all kinds of stuff on their aircraft, they didn't really do that a lot in the First World War. Many fighters didn't carry anything except a machine gun. In fact, when the war started, there were aircraft flying around that didn't have any kind of armament on the aircraft at all, and they might have somebody with a gun that was actually sitting in the plane to shoot at other planes because the aircraft itself was unarmed. But you do have things, notes here. See, the Entente fighters may carry bombs or rockets only if the optional Entente ordnance rules are in effect. So there you go. German fighters never carry ordnance. The German fighters didn't carry bombs. They didn't carry rockets. They didn't do any of that stuff. Fighter can only carry one type and must jettison all ordnance if damaged. Two-seaters do not carry ordnance. And then you have a performance hit if you are carrying ordnance. And again, that only applies to the Entente fighter aircraft. So the British, the French, and the Americans. The Germans do not carry that kind of stuff. You get a note here about your mission points, post-mission phase. And here's your mission points and what you score for doing it. You destroy it. You kill an enemy fighter. You shoot it down. You get 1 plus the enemy's air skill. So if you shoot down the Red Baron, you're going to get more points than you would if you shoot down, some more, well, let's say less skilled German pilot. Put it that way. Then you have two-seaters, bombers, etc. If you have to land in an airfield that isn't the one you took off from, you take a hit. You take a hit for losing friendly aircraft. So if your wingman gets killed, you're going to lose 2 plus his air skill. You lose only 1 if he makes it back to base, and then obviously two-seaters and bombers. Then you have campaign costs, where you can actually buy campaign victory points based on your mission points. This one is also a single side. Then we have this guy here, which is actually a trifold. So this is a big guy right here. And just taking a look at this. So combat phase, right? This is the meat of the game. What happens when you're up and you encounter enemy aircraft? You go through all of this stuff. And I won't go into this because I will do playthrough videos on this game to give you the full experience of how the game plays. I really just wanted to kind of go through the components and talk about it in general before we actually get into playing the game and seeing it played. Detection checks, so you have to detect the enemy before you can fight with them. How you determine initiative, the various actions that the aircraft can take for your friendly aircraft and your enemy aircraft, the initiative priority, how that system works when you have a tie, air-to-air gun attack, right? So, machine guns were pretty primitive compared to, what came along later. And they had to get the synchronization right for shooting through the propeller and all that kind of stuff. So I don't, that's kind of peripheral information that isn't really pertinent to gameplay, but it's just a little interesting historical note. Aircraft damage. So what happens when you get damaged? You have DRMs that will be applied for when you take hits, for when you're rolling for your damage. Destroyed friendly fighter checks, and then on this side you have your combat event checks, strafing attacks, bomb and rocket attacks, strafing and bombing damage, photo recon. You do have recon missions where you're flying to, take pictures of what the enemy dispositions might be, or etc. Things like that. You know what a reconnaissance mission is, and then you have spotting results for that as well. So this is also single-sided, but as I mentioned, it is a trifold, and then we have a bifold one as well. And so this is your flight phase. So essentially, you see the different phases. You have your campaign stuff and your mission stuff, and then you'll have this flight phase, which determines, you might come across random ground targets. You might have to deal with forced landings at either just, somewhere in the countryside instead of on an airfield. Difficulty landing if you have damage, the effect of ground fire and anti-aircraft fire. Flight event checks. They're more or less likely to happen in specific areas. Friendly rear, trenches, enemy rear. That you're going to have different. You can see that you're more likely to have events over the trenches than you are in the enemy rear, and the enemy rear is more likely to have an event than the friendly rear, which makes sense. And then you have flight event outcomes and all kinds of the turn sequence here, damage check, damage results. So a lot of tables, as you would expect, from a solitaire game. You have to roll for a lot of events and things. I mean, that's pretty much what you would expect in an aerial game. I mean, if you've played things like Skyhawk, also published by Legion, is more of a narrative game. This is narrative, but it's got it's kind of got a different flow to it than say Skyhawk or Target for Today, etc. It's similar in concept, but the application is a little bit different, and some of that is just due to the nature of this particular war from the in the aerial arena. And there is another game coming out, Western what is it called, Western Front Ace or something like that. I think Western Front Ace, that sounds right. Another Gregory A. Smith game, which he's kind of the master of this kind of solitaire narrative style game, and I am very interested. I pre-ordered that from Compass, and I am very interested in getting that game and comparing it to this game and seeing how the two kind of are similar and different, how Erik von Rossing approaches. His approach varies from, Greg Smith's approach. And to me, that's going to be interesting because I do like to play different games from different designers on the same topic, because you get different perspectives and different mechanics and, different takes on the subject matter. And that to me is part of the enjoyment of playing these games, because, you know, you play these games for various reasons. Maybe it's because you have a historical interest in that particular topic, or you're curious, or you're just, you know, a competitive person who enjoys this kind of, you know, bloodless combat, essentially, so that you can, you know, get a feel for whatever the subject matter may be. So we all play these games for different reasons, but some of them are similar to each other, I would say. Sorry, excuse me. So this is a look at the Aces of Valor solitaire game of World War I aerial combat, as I mentioned, designed by Erik von Rossing and published by Legion Games. I will be doing a playthrough video, probably several, on this. There are already some videos out there. I know Zilla Blitz did some. His stuff is always awesome. And so, you know, if you want to see that in the short term, because it might take me a week or so before I actually get a playthrough video up, then please, you know, please check that out, because as I mentioned, his stuff is always excellent. So for now, I'm going to wrap it up. My name's Joe. This has been Hexed Encountered. And until next time, happy gaming.